Angelo Parona was born on April 23, 1889, in the city of Novara in the region of Piedmont in northwestern Italy. At age 17 in 1906, Angelo entered the Naval Academy in Livorno in Tuscany, situated on the coast of the Ligurian Sea. The Naval Academy had been set up in 1881 with the merger of the naval schools that existed at the time in Genoa and Naples. Parona graduated in 1910 from the Royal Italian Navy, or Regia Marina, with the rank of ensign. His first naval battle was in the Italo-Turkish War, which took place in Libya between 1911 and 1912, and in which he served on board the armored cruiser Varese. Italy entered World War I 2 years later on the side of Britain and France, and Parona was assigned to the Sardegna, an ironclad battleship. By then, he had been promoted to lieutenant. Most of his time during the First World War was spent on the Isonzo front, the scene of a series of grueling and ongoing battles between Italy and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Most of the action took place in what is modern-day Slovenia. The 2.5-year battle between 1915 and 1917 claimed the lives of more than 1.4 million men on both sides, with nearly two-thirds of men killed being Italian. The Italians had several victories during the war, but it was the Austro-Hungarians who ultimately prevailed, even if Austria-Hungary would go on to lose World War I by the end of 1918. For his part, Parona was awarded a Silver Medal of Military Valor in May 1916 for his actions of bravery near Monfalcone on the Gulf of Trieste in the Adriatic Sea. Parona would later be given command of the submarine F-17. He once again showed extreme valor, this time in July 1918 against an enemy convoy in the Adriatic Sea. For those actions, he was awarded a Bronze Medal of Military Valor. It was clear to Parona's naval command that he was a diligent and able officer, and a valiant one at that. Parona remained in Italy's submarine division after World War I. In 1922, he would be promoted to lieutenant commander, and by 1927 was already a commander within the submarine division. For 3 years thereafter, Parona was assigned to the office of the Chief of Staff of the Navy. He became better acquainted with the political machinations of the Italian Navy, something at which he wasn't that good, as later events would show. Parona would gain greater prestige in 1932 when he, together with Captain Vladimir Opini, translated the German treatise titled Das Unterseeboot, seine Bedeutung als Teil einer Flotte, seine Stellung im Völkerrecht, seine Kriegsverwendung, seine Zukunft, seine Kriegsverwendung, seine Zukunft. The mind-boggling title of the treatise, written by Hermann Bauer, translates into English as the U-boat, its significance as part of a fleet, its position in international law, its use in war, its future on the design and the tactical use of the U-boat. It was the definitive guide to the U-boat, which Parona no doubt hugely admired. The treatise by Bauer played a significant role in how Parona viewed submarines and their strategic role in naval warfare. Between 1936 and 1937, Parona would serve as commanding officer of the heavy cruiser, the Trieste. His rise thereafter was meteoric, becoming Chief of Staff of the 3rd Naval Division. By 1938, he'd been promoted to Rear Admiral, as well as the Navy's Deputy Inspector in the construction and testing of new vessels. Incredibly, during this time, Parona would also hold the office of Naval Attaché at the Italian Embassy in Paris. By the outbreak of the Second World War, Parona had become the head of cabinet of the Ministry of the Navy in Rome. It was the Second World War which would truly define the military career of Angelo Parona and his place in submarine history. Italy entered World War II on the side of Germany on June 10, 1940. At that time, Parona was deputy commander of the Italian submarine fleet. It's important to note that Italy had already committed its submarines to aiding German submarines in the event of war. This was due to a pact signed between the two countries in June 20, 1939, at a military conference in Friedrichshafen. This was less than 3 months before the outbreak of the Second World War. At this conference between Italy's Regia Marina and Germany's Kriegsmarine, Italy had agreed to participate in German submarine warfare in the Atlantic if needed. In return, the Germans would ensure that Italy would have a submarine base in German-held territory. It so happened that France would fall to the Germans on July 25, 1940, just 6 weeks after Italy joined the war. Immediately, the Italian government under Benito Mussolini sanctioned the establishment of an Italian submarine base on the Atlantic. This would be in accordance with the agreement signed the year before at Friedrichshafen. Parona was clearly the man to oversee the project, and so was duly appointed as commander of the 21st Submarine Group, which would operate in the Atlantic from a base in France. The following month, in August 1940, Parona met with German Admiral Eberhard Weichel, who was the Kriegsmarine liaison officer in Italy. Together, the two men visited a number of ports on France's Atlantic coast and decided that the city of Bordeaux was the best location for the Italian submarine base. The choice was validated by the High Command of the Italian Navy, known as the Supermarina. September 1, 1940 was the date chosen for the commencement of the Atlantic Submarine Group and the all-important project to construct an Italian submarine base at Bordeaux. The official designation of the base at Bordeaux would be the High Command of the Italian Submarine Forces in the Atlantic, better known by the acronym BETASOM. Parona arrived at what was to be the location of BETASOM in Bordeaux at the end of August 1940. As commander of the submarine base, he was to oversee its construction, as well as the deployment of Italian submarines from it. Italian subs would engage in Atlantic warfare by the summer of that year, but, unfortunately, with very little success. Worth mentioning was that Parona was well regarded by his high command, as well as Germany's Admiral Karl Dönitz and the Seekriegsleitung, or SKL, the German Naval High Command over which Dönitz presided. The German admiral believed that Parona was a clever, determined, and able naval commander, one who was quick to cooperate with German commands. However, Parona wasn't so liked by submarine commanders at BETASOM. In fact, Parona was highly disliked for the way in which he berated and belittled them. Parona demanded that the Italian submarines be as successful as the German U-boats. However, this was a ridiculous demand, given that the Italian submarines were smaller, slower, and less technologically advanced than their German counterparts. To add to this, Italian submarines had inexperienced crews, making them completely unprepared for the harsh and highly stressful conditions of fighting in the treacherous Atlantic Ocean. Italian crews had been trained in the calmer waters of the Mediterranean Sea, in which the safety of land was never that far away. The Italian submarine division also had a lack of specific procedures and rules needed for patrol and combat missions in the Atlantic. Furthermore, Parona was also disliked by many Italian admirals. They considered him overly pro-German and too much at the beck and call of Dönitz and the Kriegsmarine. There were also many rumblings in the Italian Naval Command that Italy's submarines were simply not up to the task of operating in the North Atlantic. Those Italian admirals believed that Parona was setting up Italy's submarines for failure. Parona was considered by many to be far too stern a disciplinarian, prone to outbursts and humiliating his officers. This caused a lot of friction between Parona and his submarine commanders, as well as certain elements within the Supermarina. He was advised to tone it down and, importantly, to be less influenced by the German Navy. Parona did take measures to improve standards within the Italian submarine division by the end of 1940. For example, he ordered that older Italian submarine commanders, of which some were well over the age of 40, be replaced by younger and more aggressive commanders. There was also a greater emphasis on stamina and physical performance, hence the younger commanders. This was very much in keeping with how Germany ran its U-boat division. Parona also created a submarine school at Gotenhafen in Germany in which Italian commanders, officers, and bridge crews from BETASOM would be upskilled. Once again, the German model for its U-boats was the one prescribed. Parona also oversaw the overhaul of Italian submarines, which included, among other improvements, the reshaping of the excessively large turrets of Italian subs. The measures introduced by Parona clearly made a difference, as Italian submarines started enjoying greater successes in the Atlantic from mid-1941. The stats bear witness to this in that ships sunk by submarines from BETASOM would rise from 3,844 in 1940 to 27,335 gross tons in 1942, equating to a nearly 900% increase in successful hits on enemy vessels. However, even as the BETASOM-based submarines became more successful, Parona continued his tirades against his commanders. The friction between Parona and many of the admirals in the submarine also continued. Nevertheless, his successes were rewarded when he was made vice admiral in 1941. However, later that same year, nearly half of the submarines based at BETASOM were diverted back to Italy. They were urgently needed for operations in the Mediterranean Sea. This left far fewer submarines based at Bordeaux, and Parona was simply too high-ranking to be left in command there. And so he was replaced by Captain Romolo Polacchini as commander of BETASOM and made commander of the 3rd Cruiser Division back in Italy in late 1941. For Parona, things came to a head on April 10, 1943, when 84 United States Air Force bombers attacked his 3rd Cruiser Division at the La Maddalena base in Sardinia. The American attack sunk the cruiser Trieste, while the other cruiser, Gorizia, was disabled. Parona's command was effectively annihilated that day. After that debacle, he would go on to serve in the Navy Ministry in Rome, effectively becoming an upper-level administrator until Italy's surrender to the Allies. He remained with the Navy, being appointed to commander of the Naval Department of the Ionian Sea from 1944 to 1946, during which time he was promoted to admiral. Parona took on lighter duties in 1951 and would die in Rome on May 14, 1977, at the age of 88. It's worth noting that after leaving BETASOM and Bordeaux, Parona would never again be in active command of Italy's submarine division. Angelo Parona's time as commander of the BETASOM base in Bordeaux has not been without its post-war critics. That assessment may not have been entirely fair, however. What he achieved with the base was commendable, as noted in the highly influential Italian daily newspaper Corriere della Sera, which had this to say about what Parona achieved with BETASOM. Commander of the Italian submarines in the Atlantic, he created in the territory of occupation a submarine base that was a model of organization and ingenuity, and with tenacity and a very high sense of duty, he overcame every difficulty and instilled a high aggressive spirit in his commanders and crews, managing to obtain brilliant results and contributing to the Atlantic War with a perfect spirit of collaboration and brotherhood of arms with the German Navy. That assessment may have been somewhat gushing and overly nationalistic, but it does bear some truth. Besides Karl Dönitz, another German who held Parona in high regard was Lieutenant Commander Hans Rudolf Rösing, who was appointed as Dönitz's liaison officer at BETASOM. In his memoirs, Rösing would refer to Parona as an excellent man. Angelo Parona may have been disliked by his submarine commanders and certainly didn't possess the best leadership or interpersonal skills, but he is still to be commended for what he achieved with the Italian submarine base at Bordeaux. Like so many other naval officers, Parona was a complex man, a brave and able military man who failed to rise to true greatness as a leader.